A British man built a plane that looked like a giant insect. It flew slower than a helicopter. It cost only 1/3 the price to run. Police forces around the world wanted it. Then 2 officers died in a crash. Then the whole factory burned down in a fire. Nobody ever found out who did it. This is the true story of the strangest plane ever made. To replace helicopters. In the police forces, coast guards and pipeline companies. All had the same problem. They needed to fly low and slow. To watch things on the ground. Helicopters could do this job. But helicopters were very expensive. In a helicopter cost around £500. Every single hour just to fly. On top of that, helicopters were loud. Anyone on the ground could hear a helicopter coming from far away. This made helicopters bad for secret police work. Because criminals could simply hear it and run. A British engineer named John Edgley thought there had to be a better way. He had worked on military helicopters before. At a company called Westland. Later he went back to college at Imperial College London. To study more. While he was there he started designing a brand new kind of aircraft. His idea was simple. Build a small plane that flies slow like a helicopter. Sees everything like a helicopter. But costs much less to fly. And makes much less noise. John Edgley designed his plane in a very unusual way. Most planes put the pilot behind the engine and propeller. Edgley did the opposite. He put the pilot and 2 passengers in a big glass bubble. Right at the very front of the plane. This gave them an amazing 270-degree view. All around, and they could even look almost straight down. Behind the cabin he placed the engine. And behind the engine a 5-bladed fan inside a duct. Like a covered propeller. This duct made the fan much quieter than a normal propeller. 2 thin metal booms ran from the wings. Back to 2 small tails like the shape of a dragonfly's body. The wings sat above the cabin. So nothing blocked the view from the sides. The whole plane looked exactly like a giant bug. That is why newspapers and pilots started calling it the bug eye. Its real name was the Edgley EA Optica. Wind tunnel testing on the design started in. The first real prototype was built starting in London. The final building work happened at an aviation college. In Cranfield, England. On December, a test pilot named Angus McVitie flew the Optica into the sky for the very first time. From Cranfield. It flew exactly the way Edgley had hoped. It was slow. It was stable. And most amazing of all, it was extremely quiet. In fact, the Optica was believed to be the quietest powered plane in the entire world at that time. At its normal flying height it made about 65 decibels of noise. That is about the same noise level as a busy pub full of people talking. Or a loud lawn mower. This was a huge deal. Because it meant the plane could fly low over an area. Without anyone below even noticing it was there. The very first engine used in the prototype only had 160 horsepower. And it was too weak for the job. So Edgley switched to a stronger 200 horsepower engine. For the planes that would be sold to customers. Later that engine was upgraded again to a much more powerful 260 horsepower flat-6 engine. The same type of engine used in bigger planes like the Cessna. At the famous Paris Air Show. The Optica received its very first big order. An Australian company ordered 25 aircraft. This was huge international news for a small British company. Real investors had come on board. And a proper factory was built at Old Sarum Airfield. In Wiltshire, England. Right next to a very old and famous ancient hill fort. The Optica finally received its official UK safety certificate. On February. As soon as that happened, customers started buying the plane immediately. By the end of that same year, the Optica was already flying with the Hampshire Police, the Welsh Police, the Victoria Police in Australia, and pipeline companies in Texas and Saudi Arabia. Pilots loved flying it. They said it was very easy and forgiving to fly. It could stay in the air for up to 8 hours. On one tank of fuel, which is nearly 3 times longer than a helicopter could stay up. It flew low, usually between 500 and 1,000 feet above the ground. And because of its big glass bubble cockpit, pilots could see almost everything below them, without even needing to turn the plane. Most importantly, the Optica cost only about 1/3 of the price of a helicopter to operate. For police departments and forest fire services working on tight budgets, this was an incredible deal. The Optica was used for aerial photography, traffic reporting, forest fire spotting, wildlife counting, pipeline checking, Coast Guard watching, and border patrol. It seemed like the perfect helicopter replacement had finally arrived. But just 3 months after getting its safety certificate, disaster struck. On May, a Hampshire Police Optica was flying over an area called Ringwood in Hampshire, England. On board were a police pilot and a police photographer. During a turn, the plane suddenly lost control and crashed to the ground. Both men on board were killed instantly. Investigators from the UK Air Accidents Investigation Branch studied the crash for months. Their final report found no mechanical problem at all. There was no broken part, no engine failure, no design flaw. The most likely cause was that the plane had stalled during a sharp turn. And this was human error under pressure, not a fault with the aircraft. But sadly, the official report did not matter to the public or to investors. 2 police officers were dead and newspapers had called this plane revolutionary only months before. The bad headlines scared away investors immediately. New orders stopped coming in. Without new money, the company that built the Optica, Edgeley Aircraft Limited, went bankrupt within months. John Edgeley, the man who designed the entire plane and built the company from nothing, was forced to leave his own company. A new group of investors bought the company and renamed it Optica Industries Limited. They restarted production later in, using leftover orders from police forces who still believed in the plane. By the end of 15 new Opticas had been built. It looked like the company might survive after all. Then in the early morning hours of January, someone set fire to the Optica factory at Old Sarum Airfield. This was not an accident, it was deliberate arson. Somewhere between 8 and 14 aircraft sitting on the factory floor were completely destroyed. All the special tools and machines needed to build new planes were also destroyed. To this day, nobody has ever been caught or officially named as the person who started that fire. Over the years, people have guessed it could have been a former employee with a grudge, a rival company, or even an insurance scheme gone wrong. But nothing has ever been proven. The mystery remains unsolved decades later. Without a factory or tools, Optica Industries could not survive. The company collapsed completely. The design rights were then sold to a company called Brooklands, which built 9 more planes under a new name, Scoutmaster. But sales stayed very low. After that, the rights passed through several more owners over the following decades. But none of them ever managed to restart real production. Even after everything that happened, some Opticas are still flying today. About 8 of the original planes still exist. And around 5 of them can still legally fly. 2 of them are flying regularly in Sydney, Australia. Based at Bankstown Airport, owned by a family called the Waterhouses. In the United Kingdom, 1 Optica still flies today. And it is owned by John Edgeley himself, the very man who designed it decades ago. And Edgeley managed to buy back the design, the old tools, and 3 surviving planes. He started a new small company with 3 of his original team members. His plane returned to flying in June, and has been shown at several UK air shows ever since, including as recently as. In the United States, one more Optica is still registered and legally flying, based in Florida. So even 40 years after the crash that destroyed the company, a handful of Opticas are still doing the exact job they were built for. So what actually killed this brilliant plane? 3 things really. First was the crash in Hampshire, which was not the plane's fault, but which destroyed public trust and investor confidence overnight. Second was the mystery arson fire, which destroyed the factory and tools needed to keep building planes. Without a factory, there was no way to recover. Third, and maybe saddest of all, was timing. By the time later owners tried to relaunch the plane, in the following decades, drones had already started taking over the exact jobs the Optica was built for, like watching pipelines or patrolling borders, were now being done by cheap flying drones instead. The market the Optica was built for simply disappeared. The Edgeley Optica remains one of the most successful failed aircraft ever built. It saw better than any helicopter. It flew longer than any helicopter. It made less noise than almost anything else in the sky. And it cost a fraction of the price to operate. Yet it failed not once but twice, for reasons that had nothing to do with how good the plane actually was. Most bad planes fail because they are simply bad designs. The Optica failed while being one of the best designs of its time. That makes its story one of the strangest and saddest in the history of aviation. John Edgeley is still alive today, still flying his one surviving Optica at British air shows, and still hoping that one day, with a modern engine, his incredible plane might fly again. Would you have flown in an Optica if it were still in full production today? Let us know in the comments below.